The light flickered, a weak pulse in the dead of night, casting jagged shadows across the cramped living room. At 2 a.m., Marcus knelt on the worn carpet, his calloused hands wrestling with a frayed wire, a screwdriver clenched between his teeth. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the winter chill seeping through the thin walls of his small apartment. The bulb above buzzed like a dying insect, threatening to plunge the room into darkness. He couldn't let that happen. Not for Lily, his 6-year-old daughter, asleep in the next room, who woke up screaming whenever the world went too dark. Marcus was no electrician, just a single dad scraping by on a janitor's wage, fixing what broke because no one else would. The landlord was a ghost, and repairmen didn't come cheap. So here he was, at an hour when the world slept, trying to keep the light alive for his little girl. His knees ached, his eyes burned, but he kept at it, muttering a prayer under his breath. The weight of the past year, losing his wife, Sarah, to a sudden illness, losing his second job to layoffs, losing the ability to dream, pressed on his chest like a stone. But Lily's smile, her tiny hand in his, was the only fuel he had left. Across the city, in a penthouse that gleamed like a diamond atop a skyscraper, Eleanor sat on the edge of her silk-sheeted bed, staring at the city lights below. Barefoot, her manicured toes curled against the cold marble floor, she felt the ache of a life too big for one person. At 32, she was the heiress to a real estate empire, her father's name plastered on half the buildings in the skyline. Wealth draped her like a heavy coat, but it couldn't warm the hollow space inside her. She'd spent the evening at a gala, smiling for cameras, shaking hands with people who saw her as a checkbook, not a person. Now, alone, she couldn't sleep. The silence screamed louder than the applause ever could. Eleanor didn't know why she grabbed her coat and slipped into the elevator, her bare feet ignoring the bite of the cold lobby floor. She didn't know why she told her driver to take her to the rundown side of town, where the streetlights flickered like Marcus's bulb. Maybe it was the weight of her own loneliness, or maybe it was fate. But when her car broke down outside a crumbling apartment building, she found herself standing in the snow, staring at a faint glow from a second-floor window. Marcus heard the knock at his door, soft but insistent. He froze, the screwdriver slipping from his mouth. Who would come at this hour? He wiped his hands on his jeans, heart thudding, and opened the door to find a woman in a designer coat, barefoot in the snow, her face pale but striking, like she'd stepped out of a painting. I need help, she stammered, her voice trembling. My car broke down, and my phone's dead. Can I come in? He hesitated. Strangers at 2 a.m. weren't safe, not in this neighborhood. But her eyes, wide and unguarded, held something he recognized, desperation, the kind that mirrored his own. All right, he said gruffly, stepping aside. But keep it quiet. My kid's sleeping. Eleanor stepped into the apartment, her bare feet leaving damp prints on the floor. The place was small, cluttered with toys and mismatched furniture, but it felt alive in a way her penthouse never did. She noticed the flickering bulb, the tools scattered around, and Marcus's tired eyes. You're fixing that now? She asked, surprised. Has to be done, he said, returning to his work. Can't let it go out. Not for her. Eleanor watched him, this stranger with grease on his hands and determination in his jaw. She didn't know why she said it, but the words slipped out. Stay until it's over. The dark, I mean. Don't let it win. Marcus glanced up, startled. Her voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made him pause. Lady, I don't even know you. Eleanor, she said, offering a small smile. And I don't know you either, but you're fighting the dark. That's enough for me. What began as a chance encounter stretched into hours. Marcus fixed the light, the bulb humming steadily by 3 a.m. Eleanor stayed, sitting cross-legged on the floor, telling him about her car, her life, the way money couldn't buy peace. Marcus listened, surprised at how easy it was to talk to her. He told her about Sarah, about Lily, about the nights he stayed up worrying he wasn't enough. They were strangers, but in that small apartment, under the steady glow of a newly fixed light, they were just two people tired of carrying their burdens alone. The next morning, Eleanor's driver returned with a tow truck, but she didn't leave right away. She came back the next day with coffee and a toolbox she'd bought on a whim, offering to help Marcus fix a leaky faucet. He laughed, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in months, and let her try. She was terrible at it, But her effort made Lily giggle, and that was enough. Their lives began to intertwine, each meeting a thread pulling them closer. Eleanor found herself drawn to Marcus's resilience, his quiet love for his daughter. Marcus saw in Eleanor a kindness she hid from the world, a woman who didn't need to care but did. But their worlds were oceans apart, and the challenges came fast. Marcus struggled with his pride. Accepting help from Eleanor, whether it was groceries she accidentally bought too many of or a referral to a better job, felt like admitting he'd failed. He'd always been the provider, the fixer, and now this woman with her fancy coat and bare feet was offering him a lifeline he wasn't sure he deserved. One night, when Eleanor showed up with a new coat for Lily, he snapped. "We don't need your charity," he said, his voice sharp. Eleanor flinched, but she didn't leave. "It's not charity," she said quietly. "It's because I see you, and I want to help." Eleanor faced her own battles. Her father, a man who measured love in dollars, didn't approve of her spending time in that part of town. He saw Marcus as a liability, a nobody who could tarnish the family name. At a tense dinner, he told her to stop, warning her that her inheritance was at stake. Eleanor felt the walls of her gilded cage closing in, but the thought of losing Marcus and Lily, of returning to her empty penthouse, was worse. She stood up to her father, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm done living for your name," she said. "I want a life that feels real." Lily, too, faced her own small but mighty struggles. She loved Eleanor, who read her bedtime stories and braided her hair, but she was scared. "Are you going to leave like Mommy did?" she asked one night, her voice small. Eleanor's heart broke. She knelt beside Lily's bed, promising, "I'm here as long as you want me." The turning point came when the apartment building caught fire. It was a cold February night, and Marcus woke to smoke and screams. He grabbed Lily, his heart pounding, and ran. The flames devoured the building, their home, their everything. Standing in the snow, watching the life he'd built for Lily burn, Marcus felt the dark winning. But then Eleanor was there, barefoot again, her car screeching to a stop. She didn't hesitate, pulling them into her arms, her penthouse becoming their refuge. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt. Eleanor used her connections to find Marcus a stable job as a maintenance supervisor, one that paid enough to start over. Marcus swallowed his pride, accepting her help not as charity, but as love. Eleanor defied her father, choosing Marcus and Lily over her inheritance. She sold her penthouse, trading it for a modest house with a yard where Lily could play. Together, they faced the world's judgment, his neighbors' whispers, her social circle's sneers, and found strength in each other. By summer, the house was alive with laughter. Marcus fixed the porch light, Eleanor planted flowers, and Lily ran barefoot in the grass. The dark hadn't won. They had. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, built on late-night talks, shared struggles, and the courage to keep going. Marcus looked at Eleanor one evening, her bare feet dusty from gardening, and said, "You stayed, even when it was over." She smiled, her hand finding his. "It's never over. Not when we're together." The light in their home burned bright, a testament to two people who found each other in the dark and chose to fight for the dawn.